Do you like games? I don't know you, but I'm a big fan of games. I think games are interesting, it's intriguing, it's fun, and it's a great way of entertaining. Um, I can escape from reality a little bit. But for my parents, they always tell me it's bad for your exams, it's bad for your grades, and it's a totally waste of time. You should spend more time on reading and or any other things that is more meaningful. I think what they said makes sense because um, if you want a good results, you need to spend time and commitment on and efforts on studying. Um, but is it really 100% true? Today I'm going to show you the effects of video games usage on academic performance in third level education. This presentation divided into three parts. The first part, I'll try to answer some questions based on related work. And the second part, I'll show you the questions that I asked in a survey and how many participants answered the survey. And finally, I'll show you the results and the limitation of this research. In terms of the question, the first one is the amount of time spent on video games correlated with academic performance. So if you spend a lot of time on gaming, does that mean your academic performance will drop? The second one is there any other aspect of video games usage may have an effect on video games or may have an effect on your academic performance? Um, the third one is what's the value of this research? Um, there are a lot of works show that um, pathological gaming is bad for your academic performance, and it's actually a disease, um, which makes total sense because if you spend too much time on gaming, you play games day in day out, and binging is never good, right? It's it will definitely harm your relationship and mental health. The diagnosis and symptoms of this disease is similar to pathological gaming. It's obsessive and addictive behavior. However, if people spend limited time on video games, does that mean they will have worse results on exams? The results is of different works are for different works are different, and most of them are contradictory. Um, one research from Saudi Arabia, some medical students conducted a survey, and it shows that um, positive correlations are founded between time spent on video games and academic performance. However, another research analyzed 192,000 students from 22 countries, and the conclusion is no matter what countries students from, it consistently shows that there is no correlation between academic performance and video game usage. Um, or the correlation is too small to be problematic. And other research shows that's a obvious negative correlation between uh, video game usage and academic performance. One research shows that people who don't play games perform significantly better on exams than people who play games in terms of their GPA and their STA scores. The second question is there any other aspect of games that can affect your academic performance? Uh, I would argue that the game preference and the human interaction part of the game can actually affect people's academic performance, even though there is not much research showing that. For example, if people prefer shooting games and action games, they probably need more cooperation with their teammates, or it's more competitive and they uh, need to react in an intense situation. So these kind of skills probably also need in a group project, and it probably can facilitate their academic performance. And some people like strategy games, some people like puzzle games, and these people need these games need problem solving skills, which is the skill set that also needed in academic settings. Why this research is valuable? Because if we figured out the right amount of time and the type of games that can affect academic performance, and the human interaction can it affect academic performance, we can actually leverage the positive part of video games and the right usage of it to identify the right usage of it and get rid of the negative part of the video games. Then we can improve and facilitate better learning behavior and more healthier uh, video game usage. The second part of the presentation, I'm going to show you the question that I asked in the survey and the participants of the survey. 15 questions asked in the survey, and it included gaming frequency, gaming preference, and do people believe video games can have an impact on their mental health and their academic performance. For the gaming frequency, the reason why I asked about the frequency instead of the time they spend on gaming is because I believe it is easier to answer, and more importantly, it shows how addictive you are. For example, if people can control themselves, they wouldn't spend on video games every day. And for people who don't like games, they probably play games monthly. Um, what there's other game, oh, and I asked people about their gaming preference. For example, the genre of games they like, and what do they think the most important part of the game. And I also asked people, do they believe video games can have a positive impact on their mental health, and asked about, do video games makes them connect to people better. Finally, I asked about the academic performance. The reason why I asked about ABCD is because it's easier to answer than how many percent of um, results you get. There are 34 participants in this survey, and around half of them are male and around half of them are female. Um, the last section I'll tell you the result of the survey and maybe the gaming frequency or gaming preference and believing in mental health, positive effects of mental health or not will affect or their academic performance. And finally, I'll tell you the limitation of this research. The people who play games every single day and people who hardly ever play games, they have good score. Um, Around half of the students scored A, which is pretty good. But can you guess For students who play games 3 times a week, how many percentage of them got A? The answer is 90%. Almost all of them. And the rest of the 10%, they still got a B, which is also pretty good. And if we look at the absolute number of people who scored A, we found most of the A are scored by people who play games 3 times a week. In terms of the gaming preference, who do you think can perform better on exams? Is it the people who think realistic shooting and fighting is the most essential part of the game, or people who believe challenging level design is the most essential part of the game? The answer is people who believe challenging level design is the most important part of the game. They performed better than people who believe realistic shooting and fighting is the most important part of the game. And similarly, people who prefer action games and FPS games performed worse than people who prefer puzzle games and strategy games. In terms of the impact of video games on mental health, people who believe the positive effect of video games on mental health, they performed worse than people who don't believe it. For people who don't believe the positive impact, 86% of them scored A. And I was surprised by that because I thought if people who think mental health, video games can improve their mental health, they could perform better because they have better mental health conditions. But the result is contradictory to my hypothesis. Similarly, for people who believe that video games help them connect people better, they performed worse than people who don't believe it. Even though there are some patterns found in this research, there are also a lot of limitations. The first one is the scale is not big enough to be really representative. And the second one is there may be respondent bias. People who don't like games, they probably won't finish the survey. And people who are interested in games, they may finish the survey and it's not a big deal for them. The third one is people probably will not be 100% honest, because I believe even though it is anonymous, some people may think it's quite personal, so they won't be 100% honest about their academic performance and their gaming preference. And the last one is this research only showed the correlation, and more further analysis are needed to show the causation of the two elements. So the conclusion. There are some positive correlations found. The first one is mild gaming frequency, are positive correlated with academic performance. Specifically, it's 3 times a week. Also, preference of challenging level design. Do not believe video games can improve the mental health. Are also positively correlated with academic performance. There are two things negatively correlated with academic performance. One is the preference of shooting and fighting games, and then another one is belief that video games can improve their mental health and help them connect to people better. Again, this research is limited, and in order to find the causation between two things, more researches are needed. The source image are from a website with Creative Commons license, and some images are Googled with Creative Commons license. And that's our bibliography. Thanks for your attention.